Señora Presidenta,
Madam President,
jefes de Estado,
Excellencies, heads of state, heads of government,
y altos representantes,
high representatives of the governments of the world.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning
A todos y a todas.
to all of you.
En primer lugar,
First of all,
quiero invitarles
I would like to invite you, very respectfully,
no hayan podido leer este libro,
to those who have not read
que
this
lo
book,
leamos.
to read it.
Noam Chomsky,
Noam
uno de
Chomsky,
los más prestigiosos
one of the most prestigious
de esta América y del mundo.
American and world intellectuals.
Uno de sus más
Noam
recientes trabajos.
Chomsky, and this is one of his most recent books, Hegemony or Survival.
Hegemonía o supervivencia.
Hegemony or
La
Survival,
estrategia imperialista
the
de
imperialist
Estados
strategy of the United
Excelente
States.
trabajo para
It's
entender
an
Unidos,
excellent
lo que ha pasado
book
en el mundo
to help us understand what has been happening in the world throughout the 20th century and what's happening now, and the greatest threat looming over our planet,
del
the
imperialismo
hegemonistic pretensions of the American empire are placing at risk the very survival of the human species.
Seguimos alertando sobre ese peligro.
We continue to warn you about this danger, and we appeal to the people of the United States
Esta amenaza
and the world
que es como
to halt
la propia
this
espada de
threat,
Damocles. Yo pensaba
which is like a
leer
sword
algún capítulo,
hanging
pero
over our heads. I had considered reading from this book, but for the sake of time, I shall just leave it as a recommendation. It reads easily. It's a very good book. I'm sure, madam, you are familiar with it. It appears in English, in Russian, in Arabic, in German.
Yo creo que los primeros ciudadanos que deberían
I
leer
think
este
that
libro
the
son los
first people
ciudadanos
who
hermanos y
should
hermanas
read
de
this
los
book
Estados Unidos.
are our brothers and sisters in the
La
United States,
amenaza la tienen en su propia casa.
because their threat is in their own house. The devil is right at home. The devil himself is right in the
Ayer vino el
house.
diablo aquí.
And the devil came here yesterday.
Ayer estuvo el diablo
Yesterday, the devil came here. Right here.
aquí. En este mismo lugar
Right here.
huele a azufre
And it
todavía.
smells of sulfur still today.
Esta mesa donde me ha tocado hablar.
This table that I am now standing in front of.
Señoras, señores,
Yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, from this
el
rostrum,
señor presidente de los
the
Estados Unidos, a
President
quien yo
of
llamo
the
el diablo,
United States, the gentleman to whom I refer as the
vino
devil,
aquí
came here
hablando como dueño del mundo.
talking as if he owned the world,
Como dueño del mundo.
truly, as the owner of the world.
Un psiquiatra no estaría de más
I think we could call a
analizar el
psychiatrist
discurso
to
de ayer
analyze
del
yesterday's
presidente de los
statement
Estados Unidos.
made by the President of the United
Como
States.
vocero del imperialismo vino a dar
As the spokesman of
sus recetas
imperialism, he came to share his nostrums
para tratar de mantener el
to
actual esquema
try
de dominación
to preserve the current pattern of domination, exploitation, and pillage of the peoples of the
una
world.
película de Alfred Hitchcock.
An Alfred Hitchcock
Estaría buena.
movie
Incluso yo propondría
could use it as a scenario. I would
una
even
receta
propose a title,
del diablo.
The Devil's
Es
Recipe.
decir, el imperialismo norteamericano, y aquí lo dice Chomsky,
As
con una
Chomsky says
claridad meridiana
here
y
clearly
profunda,
and
está
in
haciendo desesperados esfuerzos por
the American
consolidar
empire
su
is doing
sistema
all it
hegemónico
can
de
to
dominación.
consolidate
Nosotros no
its
podemos permitir que eso
hegemonistic
ocurra.
system of domination, and we cannot allow them to do that. We cannot allow
La dictadura mundial que se
world
consolide, pues.
dictatorship to
Que se
be
consolide la dictadura mundial.
consolidated.
El discurso del presidente tirano
The
mundial
world
lleno de
tyrant's
cinismo, lleno de
statement,
hipocresía, la
cynical,
hipocresía imperial,
hypocritical,
el intento de
full of
controlar
this
todo.
imperial hypocrisy
Ellos
from
quieren
the
imponernos
need
el
they
modelo
have to
democrático
control everything. They say they want to impose a democratic model,
como lo conciben.
but that's
La falsa
their
democracia de las
democratic
élites.
model.
Y además
It's the
un modelo
false
democrático
democracy
muy
of
original,
elites,
impuesto
and I would say
a
a
bombazos
very original democracy that's imposed by weapons and bombs and firing weapons. What a strange democracy. Aristoteles might not recognize it, or others who are at the root of democracy. What type of democracy do you impose with marines and bombs and... The President of the United States yesterday said to us right here in this room, and I'm quoting, "Anywhere you look, you hear extremists telling you you can escape from poverty and recover your dignity through violence, terror, and martyrdom." Wherever he looks, he sees extremists. And you, my brother, he looks at your color and he says, "Oh, there's an extremist." Evo Morales, the worthy president of Bolivia, looks like an extremist to him. The imperialists see extremists everywhere. It's not that we are extremists, it's that the world is waking up. It's waking up all over, and people are standing up. I have the feeling, dear world dictator, that you are going to live the rest of your days as a nightmare, because the rest of us are standing up. All those of us who are rising up against American imperialism, who are shouting for equality, for respect, for the sovereignty of nations. Yes, you can call us extremists, but we are rising up against the empire, against the model of domination. The President then, and this he said himself, he said, "I have come to speak directly to the populations in the Middle East, to tell them that my country wants peace." That's true. If we walk in the streets of the Bronx, if we walk around New York, Washington, San Diego, in any city, San Antonio, San Francisco, and we ask individuals, the citizens of the United States, what does this country want? Does it want peace? They'll say yes, but the government doesn't want peace. The government of the United States doesn't want peace. It wants to exploit its system of exploitation, of pillage, of hegemony, through war. It wants peace. Well, what's happening in Iraq? What happened in Lebanon? Palestine. What's happening? What's happened over the last 100 years in Latin America and in the world? And now threatening Venezuela. New threats against Venezuela, against Iran. He spoke to the people of Lebanon. Many of you, he said, have seen how your homes and communities were caught in the crossfire. How cynical can you get? What a capacity to lie, shamefacedly. The bombs in Beirut, with millimetric precision? This is crossfire? He's thinking of a Western, when people would shoot from the hip and somebody would be caught in the crossfire. This is imperialist fire, fascist, assassin, genocidal, the empire and Israel firing on the people of Palestine and Lebanon. That is what happened. And now we hear we're suffering because we see the homes destroyed. The President of the United States came to talk to the peoples, to the peoples of the world. He came to say, I brought some documents with me because this morning I was reading some statements, and I see that he talked to the people of Afghanistan, the people of Lebanon, the people of Iran, and he addressed all these peoples directly, and you can wonder, just as the President of the United States addresses those peoples of the world, what would those peoples of the world tell him if they were given the floor? What would they have to say?
porque conozco la mayor parte del alma de esos
And
pueblos,
I
los
think
pueblos del sur, los
I
pueblos
have some
atropellados.
inkling of what the peoples of the South, the oppressed, they think. They say, that is what those
Si los
people
pueblos del
would
mundo
say
pudieran
if
hablarle
they
a
were given
una sola voz al
the
imperio de los
microphone,
Estados Unidos.
and if they could speak with
Por
one
eso,
voice to the
señora
American
Presidenta,
imperialists. And that is
colegas,
why,
amigas y
Madam
amigos,
President, my colleagues, my
nosotros
friends,
el año pasado
last year
vinimos aquí a este
we
mismo
came
salón,
here
como todos los años,
to this
en los
same
últimos 8.
hall, as we have been doing for the past
Y
8
decíamos
years, and we said
algo que hoy está confirmado.
something that has now been
Realmente, yo creo
confirmed, fully confirmed.
Aquí casi nadie en esta sala
I don't think
pudiera pararse
anybody
a defenderlo.
in this room,
Pararse
anybody
a defenderlo.
in this room
A
could
defender el sistema de
defend
Naciones Unidas. Aceptémoslo
the
con
system.
honestidad. El
Let's
sistema de
accept,
Naciones Unidas,
let's be
nacido después de la
honest.
Segunda Guerra
The
Mundial,
UN system
colapsó,
born after
se
the Second
desplomó,
World War
no
collapsed.
sirve.
It's
Bueno, para venir aquí a dar
worthless.
discursos, a vernos una vez
Oh
al
yes,
año.
it's good to
Sí,
bring us
para eso
together
sí sirve.
once a year,
Y
see
para
each
hacer
other, make
documentos muy
statements,
largos y hacer buenas
and prepare all
reflexiones,
kinds of
y oír
long
buenos discursos
documents
como el
and
de Evo
listen to
ayer,
good
como el de
speeches like
Lula.
Evo's yesterday's or President Lula's.
Sí, para eso
Yes,
sirve. Y muchos
it's good for
discursos
that.
que estábamos oyendo
And there
ahora
are
mismo
a lot
del
of
presidente
speeches,
de
and
Sri
we've
Lanka
heard lots, and the
y de la
President of Sri
presidenta
Lanka,
de
for
Chile.
instance, and the President of Chile.
Pero nos han convertido a esta asamblea
But we, the
en un
Assembly,
órgano
have
meramente
been
deliberativo.
turned into a merely deliberative
Meramente
organ.
deliberativo, sin ningún tipo de poder
We have no
para
power,
impactar de la más
no
mínima
power
manera
to
la
make
realidad terrible que
any
vive el mundo. Por
impact
eso
on the
nosotros volvemos a
terrible
proponer
situation in the
Venezuela.
world. And that is
Vuelve
why
a proponer aquí
Venezuela
hoy,
once again
este día 20 de
proposes here
septiembre,
today, 20
que
September,
refundemos
that
las Naciones
we
Unidas. Y nosotros
re-establish
hicimos el año
the
pasado, señora
United
Presidenta,
Nations. Last
4
year,
modestas
Madam, we
propuestas
made 4 modest
que consideramos,
proposals that
bueno,
we
de
felt
necesidad
to be
impostergable.
crucially
Para que las asumamos.
important.
Bueno, los jefes de Estado, los jefes de gobierno,
We have to assume these responsibilities, our heads of state, our
y las discutamos.
ambassadors, our
Primero,
representatives, and we have to
la
discuss these. The
expansión,
first
ayer
is
lo decía Lula aquí mismo,
expansion, and Lula
del Consejo de
talked
Seguridad,
about this yesterday
tanto
right
en sus
here. The
categorías
Security
permanentes
Council, both
como en las
as
no
regards
permanentes,
permanent and non-permanent
dando entrada a nuevos países desarrollados
categories.
y a países
New
subdesarrollados del tercer
developing
mundo.
countries and
como nuevos miembros
LDCs
permanentes.
must be given access
Eso en primer
as
lugar.
new
En
permanent
segundo
members.
lugar,
That's step one.
Bueno, la
Second,
aplicación de métodos eficaces de atención y
effective
resolución de los
methods
conflictos
to
mundiales.
address and
Métodos
resolve
transparentes de
world
debate, de
conflicts.
decisión.
Transparent
Tercero, nos
debates,
parece
transparent
fundamental la
decision
supresión
making.
inmediata.
Point 3, the
eso
immediate
es un clamor de
suppression,
todos.
and that is something everyone's calling
Ese
for,
mecanismo antidemocrático,
of the anti-democratic
del veto.
mechanism known as the veto.
el veto en las decisiones del Consejo de Seguridad.
The veto
Vaya un
on
ejemplo
decisions of the Security Council.
reciente.
Let me give you a
El veto
recent
inmoral
example.
del gobierno de los Estados Unidos permitió
The immoral veto of the United States allowed the Israelis with impunity to destroy Lebanon,
de todos nosotros,
right in front of all of us as we stood there watching.
evitando una resolución en el Consejo de Seguridad.
A resolution in the Council was prevented. Fourthly, we have to strengthen, as we've always said, the role, the powers of the Secretary General of the United Nations. Yesterday, the Secretary General practically gave us a speech of farewell, and he recognized that over the last 10 years, things have just gotten more complicated. Hunger, poverty, violence, human rights violations have just worsened. That is the tremendous consequence of the collapse of the United Nations system and American hegemonistic pretensions. Madam, Venezuela a few years ago decided to wage this battle within the United Nations by recognizing the United Nations as members of it that we are and lending it our voice, our thinking. Our voice is an independent voice to represent the dignity and the search for peace and the reformulation of the international system, to denounce persecution and aggression of hegemonistic forces in the planet. This is how Venezuela has presented itself. Bolivar's home has sought a non-permanent seat on the Security Council. Let's see. Well, there's been an open attack by the U.S. government, an immoral attack to try and prevent Venezuela from being freely elected to a post in the Security Council. The Imperium is afraid of truth, is afraid of independent voices. It calls us extremists, but they are the extremists. And I would like to thank all the countries that have kindly announced their support for Venezuela, even though the ballot is a secret one and there's no need to announce things. But since the Imperium has attacked openly, this strengthened the convictions of many countries, and their support strengthens us. Mercosur, as a bloc, has expressed its support. Our brothers in Mercosur, Venezuela with Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay is a full member of Mercosur, and many other Latin American countries, CARICOM, Bolivia, have expressed their support for Venezuela. The Arab League, the full Arab League has voiced its support, and I am immensely grateful to the Arab world, to our Arab brothers, our Caribbean brothers. The African Union, almost all of Africa, has expressed its support for Venezuela, and countries such as Russia or China, and many others. I thank you all warmly on behalf of Venezuela, on behalf of our people, and on behalf of the truth. Because Venezuela, with a seat on the Security Council, will be expressing not only Venezuela's thoughts, but it will also be the voice of all the peoples of the world, and we will defend dignity and truth. Over and above all of this, Madam President, I think there are reasons to be optimistic. A poet would have said, helplessly optimistic, because over and above the wars and the bombs and the aggressive and the preventive war and the destruction of entire peoples, one can see that a new era is dawning. As Silvia Rodriguez says, the era is giving birth to a heart. There are alternative ways of thinking. There are young people who think differently, and this has already been seen within the space of a mere decade. It was shown that the end of history was a totally false assumption, and the same was shown about Pax Americana and the establishment of the capitalist neoliberal world. It has been shown, this system, to generate mere poverty. Who believes in it now? What we now have to do is define the future of the world. Dawn is breaking out all over. You can see it in Africa, in Europe, in Latin America, and Oceania. I want to emphasize that optimistic vision. We have to strengthen ourselves, our will to do battle, our awareness. We have to build a new and better world. Venezuela joins that struggle, and that's why we are threatened. The U.S. has already planned, financed, and set in motion a coup in Venezuela, and it continues to support coup attempts in Venezuela and elsewhere. President Michelle Bachelet reminded us just a moment ago the horrendous assassination of the former Foreign Minister Orlando Letelier. And I would just add one thing. Those who perpetrated this crime are free. And that other event where an American citizen also died were Americans themselves. They were CIA killers, terrorists. And we must recall in this room that in just a few days there will be another anniversary. 30 years will have passed from this other horrendous terrorist attack on the Cuban plane where 73 innocents died, a Cubana de Aviación airliner. And where is the biggest terrorism of this terrorist of this continent who took the responsibility for blowing up the plane? He spent a few years in jail in Venezuela thanks to CIA and then government officials. He was allowed to escape, and he lives here in this country, protected by the government, and he was convicted. He has confessed to his crime, but the U.S. government has double standards. It protects terrorism when it wants to, and this is to say that Venezuela is fully committed to combating terrorism and violence, and we are one of the peoples who are fighting for peace. Luis Posada Carriles is the name of that terrorist who is protected here, and other tremendously corrupt people who escaped from Venezuela are also living here under protection. A group that bombed various embassies, that assassinated people during the coup. They kidnapped me, and they were going to kill me, but I think God reached down and our people came out into the streets, and the army was true, and so I'm here today. But these people who led that coup are here today in this country, protected by the American government, and I accuse the American government of protecting terrorists and of having a completely cynical discourse. We mentioned Cuba. Yes, we were just there a few days ago. We just came from there, happily. And there you see another era born. The Summit of the 15, the Summit of the Non-Aligned, adopted a historic resolution. This is the outcome document. Don't worry, I'm not going to read it. But you have a whole set of resolutions here that were adopted after open debate in a transparent manner. More than 50 heads of state. Havana was the capital of the South for a few weeks, and we have now launched once again the group of the non-aligned with a new momentum. And is there anything I could ask all of you here, my companions, my brothers and sisters? It is to please lend your goodwill, to lend momentum to the non-aligned movement for the birth of the new era, to prevent hegemony and to prevent further advances of imperialism. And as you know, Fidel Castro is the president of the non-aligned for the next 3 years, and we can trust him to lead the charge very efficiently. If unfortunately, they thought, oh, Fidel was going to die, but they're going to be disappointed because he didn't, and he's not only alive, he's back in his green fatigues, and he's now presiding the non-aligned. So, my dear colleagues, Madam President, a new strong movement has been born, a movement of the South. We are men and women of the South. With this document, with these ideas, with these criticisms, I'm now closing my file. I'm taking the book with me, and don't forget, I'm recommending it very warmly and very humbly to all of you. We want ideas to save our planet, to save the planet from the imperialist threat. And hopefully, in this very century, in not too long a time, we will see this. We will see this new era, and for our children and our grandchildren, a world of peace based on the fundamental principles of the United Nations. But a renewed United Nations. And maybe we have to change location. Maybe we have to put the United Nations somewhere else, maybe a city of the South. We've proposed Venezuela. You know that my personal doctor had to stay in the plane. The chief of security had to be left in a locked plane. Neither of these gentlemen was allowed to arrive and attend the UN meeting. This is another abuse and another abuse of power on the part of the devil. It smells of sulfur here, but God is with us, and I embrace you all. May God bless us all. Good day to you.